We good to go?
How are you? Good to see you.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm here with the team in the Emergency Operations Center, the folks who really took the lead, and hopefully getting Henri, Tropical Storm Henri, in the rearview mirror. We still have a way to go. Most of the winds are dissipating, but the rains are with us, and there's a real risk of flash flooding. The ground is so saturated that it can flood with just another inch of rain. But let me give you the good news. The good news is that if we have 28,000 folks still without power, I've had strong assurances from Joe Nolan and Eversource that the overwhelming majority, 90+%, will have their power restored by this time tomorrow. If there's some that take a little bit longer because they're at the end of a long road or a big tree has come down, it takes a bit, they're going to get everything done over the next 2 to 3 days. And look, the storm did us a bit of a favor. It did Rhode Island no favors by veering a little bit more to the northeast. We've got down to 28,000 outages. They're still closer to 70,000. That said, I think they're going to see some of the crews heading from Connecticut up to Rhode Island to be of any assistance that they can be. We had 6,500 beds filled with utility workers last night. I want to say a lot of folks came from all over the region. And it was better to be, over-prepared than under-prepared. And I'd like to say a little credit where credit's due. Marissa and our team put some pressure on the utilities to make sure we get it right this time. I like to think we got it a lot better right. And hats off, in particular, those utility workers and those linemen who, over the last, 12 hours in the pouring rain and gusty winds, have been climbing those bucket trucks. And I think we've got over 20,000 people already restored. That's an effort that I will remember. So that said, we have the end of the storm surge warning. That's a good news. We've got virtually all of our roads open. I think there's several secondary roads that still have to be done. But the flooding is a risk. You probably heard that I-91 was shut down northbound for a while just because in a construction site there was a lot of water backup, and that had to be repaired. So there's going to be still some risk tomorrow. Don't be stupid. If you see a lot of, please stay close to home if you can, but assuming if you have to go to work, whatever, you see those puddles of water, be careful. You don't know whether that's 1 inch or a foot of water there. That said, I think we're flattening the curve at this point when it comes to where we are on this. I think that we'll probably see some down power lines. Don't touch them if you see them. Stay away. Leave that to the experts. There will be some thunderstorms scattered over the course of the next 24 hours, so there will be some incidental flooding. But at this point, I'd like to say that our utilities were better prepared, and we've taken care of folks. Let's wait and see before we congratulate and see where we are in 24 hours. I'd like to think the lights are on. We're back in business.
This has to be a sense of relief in some regards. I mean, when we were talking about this yesterday, we talked to you, we talked to Eversource as well, that they were saying it could be 8 to 21 days. So this must feel good knowing that we prepared, and thankfully we didn't need all those preparations.
Yeah, two things. I mean, I said, look, don't overpromise and underdeliver. Do the opposite. But they scared us with that 21-day stuff. I know that's a regulatory thing. It's going to be closer to 3 days, starting from earlier today. So I think that's incredibly positive. They got extra crews on the ground. In part, we said you have to have extra crews on the ground. We're not going to accept what happened last year, this year, and that's made a difference. And then our hearts go out to Rhode Island because they got hit pretty hard.
Can you address some of the flooding issues? I mean, obviously we've had a lot of rain this summer. The ground is saturated. We've seen some of the streets. There's no doubt it's going to take a while. Some of the roads may actually collapse or buckle because of all the water.
That's exactly right. I mean, we had so much water over the last 10 days, and this on top of it, and then what we're going to have tomorrow. Look, it's a reminder what we mean by resiliency. When Deep talks about it, I didn't quite exactly know what it meant, except we have a lot of parking lots and water flows, and there's no place for it to flow. And that's why it's so important that we be very careful. Our substations are often at risk. You know, most of the wealth of the state of Connecticut is in waterfront communities or along the shore, including the electric substations for United Illuminating. So we have to be extraordinarily careful about that. And that's one of the things that wetlands do. They absorb a lot of the water. They are a drainage system for us. So strategically having them is important as well in terms of resiliency in the future.
And you had mentioned earlier that you want to work with Rhode Island to help them in any way they help you. Is this a FEMA issue? Will you be asking for any kind of funds? And what will you be doing for Rhode Island, and what will they be doing for us?
Rhode Island, talk to the utilities, but we had folks coming from everywhere from Texas to Maine to help out Connecticut when we thought we were going to be the eye of the storm. And if Eversource and UI think they have some crews that could be helpful to Rhode Island, I've been on the phone with the governor of Rhode Island. We're going to do everything we can to help them. You look, in terms of FEMA and the additional monies, as you know, the president's given us the emergency declaration. That's providing some preliminary support now, and we're going to ask our municipalities to quantify what they think their Henri-related expenses are and see what type of a compensation we can get them.
Something that we were talking about yesterday was, I know that we were talking about the EOC having, the search and rescue teams available through this COVID, people got stuck. I know that there was flooding. Were any of those teams utilized? Did it overwhelmingly seem like people abided by these evacuation orders and recommendations?
Who wants to take that? Brenda or James? Or? Thank you.
Presently, we have 2 members of the search and rescue team out headed towards Bolton to review a downed bridge on private property. So that's one of the aspects. We're also going to try to hold on to these teams for a little longer and through tomorrow until the thunderstorms and the runoff, and we can be sure that we won't have flash flooding and have to rescue people.
Governor, obviously the storm that got the utilities in all that trouble was a different animal, 700,000 outages. So how do you analyze the utilities' performance? What are the metrics? Are you going to be looking at how many people they had in advance? That was one of the criticisms last time. So what's the approach? Because these are obviously 2 very different storms.
Well, yeah, the jury's still out, first of all. Let's wait 48 hours and see whether the proof of the pudding's in the eating. But look, you know my feeling. I don't like the idea of utilities just they live on a pass-through cost. I don't think that gives them the right incentives to do the right thing, and I think Marissa, I don't know if she's allowed to talk about it, is going to be putting in place, though I hope, some of the most aggressive performance-based metrics there are. So your return and your compensation is based upon how you deliver the goods. And some of that is tied to the severity of the storm, some of that's tied to the number of people you have on the ground, but most of it's tied to getting people's power back up and operating. But Marissa, do you want to, or
Yeah,
Susan?
and both. But one thing I do want to add, Mark, is that the legislature and PURA put into place benchmarks and metrics for the utilities to follow, and they're following them, and that's why we're in this good place. Marissa?
Thank you. Thank you. To the Lieutenant Governor and Governor's point, that's absolutely right. I think what we saw through this storm is we saw the utilities leaning in and preparing with the best resources that they could for the best forecast that we were seeing. The planning criteria that was widely discussed yesterday of 8 to 21 days, certainly that we recognize that inspired some concern from residents, but really what that is planning criteria that suggests that if they have X number of damaged spots and X number of outages, that's what we're looking at. And to avoid a situation like that, they have to pre-stage resources in a way that they did not before last tropical storm. So what we'll be doing after this storm, just like we do with every storm, is using the framework, especially from the Take Back Our Grid Act, to evaluate whether they did the best with the forecast that they had ahead of time, and whether based on the damage locations and outages that they did see, whether the resources were appropriately procured ahead of time. So we'll do.
Do you think that some of the measures the state has taken to make utility companies more accountable have worked, and that they did not want to repeat performance this
year as of last year and other years?
I think it's demonstrable that what the Take Back Our Grid Act that was a bipartisan piece of legislation signed into law by the governor last year. I think that's demonstrable as to how much better we did this year. PURA put into place dozens of mandates after our tropical storm investigation that we saw the fruits of here, right? We saw the municipal liaison and Make Safe crews reporting to the municipalities. We have not heard any of the widespread communications problems that were reported last year. So I think that's really a credit to the legislature and the governor for their leadership on this topic.
Yeah, I'll only add that Susan and I have had, several municipal calls with every single municipal leader and given a basic presentation, asked who has questions, and very, very few questions. That says to me that the regional operating centers, with a close liaison with the utilities, they're answering those questions and getting responses at the local level, which is just great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.